Well, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. Um, it is, oh, by the way, Mary Kay Berry Kiss lipstick is the color of today. Since I am the lipstick lady, I kind of feel obligated to tell you about lipstick. But I'm also a Gen Xer, pushing that 60's envelope in the next year. And I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do this video on originally. And things just always end up kind of giving you something to talk about. Life in general. At some point, we'll give you something to talk about. And I just like to come on here and just share with you things that I'm thinking about or things going on in my life. So, again, I'm the lipstick lady Pam, and I'm, like I said, a Gen Xer and getting closer day by day to that 60's, which, hey, I guess that's something to be happy about. Not everybody gets that opportunity. So, yeah, I'm okay with that. But I decided I'm going to do this video on regret and feeling kind of invisible, I guess you could say. Oh no, I hope I'm not going to get a sneezing spell here. There's something in the air. I tell you what, I don't know what it is. If it's this crepe myrtles or what, but there's something in the air right now that has been giving me the sneezes, something terrible. And my husband too. And actually even the dog was sneezing earlier, so there's something in the air. But back to the story. Have you ever, if you're in this age group, maybe not even quite in this age group, maybe you're past this age group, do you ever just feel kind of like you're invisible to people? Like, you're here, but if you weren't here, would people even know that you weren't here? Which also kind of leads to, do you have a lot of regret, like some life choices that you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that? Or oh, I really shouldn't have done that. I'm sure everybody has that. From young age, there's probably a lot of things people have regret, but the older you get, it seems like there's more of that. Maybe selling a house that you look back on and you think, that was really stupid. I should have never sold that house. Or maybe you made a move somewhere and you think that was dumb. I should have never went there. Maybe you took a different job and you regret not sticking with the old job. There's just so many different things that you feel regret with. And the older you get, you start to kind of look back at some of those things. And, I know with myself, kind of have a different perspective on some of those things. Obviously, you can't go back in time. So you can't go back and change things that have been done. Maybe you've said something or done something to somebody that you wish you wouldn't have, or for somebody, and you think, oh, that was a waste. Shouldn't have done that. But, there's a lot of those kind of moments. Like I said, the older you get, the more you reflect on that kind of stuff. I know my husband and I, there's a lot of things we regret that we've done in life. And, some of it's led us to living here in this apartment in Texas. So, we like our apartment, don't get me wrong. This apartment is fine. But I would rather not be in an apartment. It's just several reasons. I mean, don't get me wrong. Living in an apartment does have its draw. We do have no lawn care. Don't have to worry about that. And with my husband's health, we had lived on an acre prior to moving to Texas. We had an acre of land, and he did love the yard. We both did. It was a nice yard. Um, he had his garden. He loves to garden. He's always been a green thumb. He can grow anything. I always say if Dave can't grow it, nobody can. I, on the other hand, I can kill any plant given to me. So he's been the green thumb of the family. And luckily I think our kids are, both the boys have kind of taken after him for that. The oldest one for sure. He can grow things quite well. But he loved that property. We had a nice 2-car garage that he was retired at that point, and he enjoyed sitting out there, just people watching when he wasn't gardening or tinkering in his yard. And but the house was very, very tiny, and it was cute on the outside. I mean, it was a cute little house, but it was just smothering almost how small it was. So we moved from that. There was a house in town, because we rented that. Now, we did own houses in the past, but then we went to renting, and then we just always seemed to stay renting. Either we didn't have money to go into a new mortgage, and a lot of times, if you don't have a lot of money, getting into a mortgage at our age isn't even a thing. People aren't going to loan you something unless you have quite a substantial amount down, I'm sure. Because they know you're getting up there in age. It's not like you're going to probably be around paying on it for the next 30 years. So, hey, it is what it is. But there was a house in town that we had always had really liked. And matter of fact, at one point, we had looked at purchasing that house way back when. I know we had one son. I don't know if both of them were born at that time. They may have been, but it's been a long time ago. And we had looked at buying it, and at that time it was just out of our price range for what we were accepted or what we were qualified to buy for. So we ended up buying a different house instead. Well, that house years later down the road went as a rental property. And it was by a private individual. And so our one son, he had rented it for quite a few years. And then when he moved out, our other son ended up renting it. And he was there for, I think, even longer than the first son. And so when he moved out, it was available, and actually was the same landlord we had. So we said, hey, can we get that house? He knew we'd always liked it. So we moved in there, and we were just starting, because he let us do, he was a great landlord. He had the thought, as long as you paid the rent, you could, fix it up however you wanted, as long as it wasn't damaging the property in any way. He was good with that. And so he let us move in, and we were starting to fix it up and make it a nicer, fix up things that maybe needed a little fixing. And then we decided, we came down on vacation down to Texas. And we were actually planning a trip down here, and our son and daughter-in-law had just bought their first home, and which they live down here. They just bought their first home, and they'd been in it like 6 weeks, and it got struck by lightning and burnt. So we felt so much regret about not being where they were, not being able to, kind of be there, not to help them out financially, but just to be there to kind of guide them through. We had a house fire at one time. Our house had burnt. And so, trying to tell them over the phone, make sure you check for this, make sure the insurance company knows about this, make sure, the insurance company knows about this, make sure the contractors are checking this. And, it just was things that we learned through our journey of a house fire. And we felt so bad about being, thousands of miles away, across the country, basically, from where they were. And not being able to, kind of just help guide them and be here for moral support plus, whatever we could do to help. So we ended up coming down on vacation, and it was just so nice. Of course, it'd been winter where we were at. We come down to Texas, and it was like coming into summertime. Well, summertime for where we were coming from, springtime for here. But it was just really nice, and it was nice being around the kids and the grandkids, and it was beautiful where they lived. And thought, yeah, maybe we should do it. We had our granddaughter still lives in Michigan, and she's our oldest grandchild, and we were very close to her. And that was the one thing that was keeping us there. And, it's like, okay, she's going to grow up. Who knows if she's going to want to stay there? Do we actually want to stay living where we don't have, we have family there, obviously, but because we had grown up there and lived there. But it's like, or do we take advantage of moving cross country to be with her son and his family? And so we decided, let's do it. Let's just jump on it and go. And we did that. And not that we really hate Texas. We hate the heat. We don't like the weather. We don't like the traffic. And it may just be this area. A lot of people have said it's this area. Now I know a lady that lives here that moved here from Tucson or something in Arizona, and she had like people doing crack in her front yard all the time. Yeah, I can see now she lives in the country here. It is better living here, I'm sure, than what she lived at. But for us, we didn't have it that bad where we were at. We actually kind of enjoyed it. It was just the aspect of being closer to our son and daughter-in-law. And our other son and daughter-in-law, we weren't on the best of terms at that time. Every family goes through those things. And so we opted to move here. And, it's been okay. But since we've moved here, it seems like everything is way more expensive. And when you're living on a fixed budget, that makes it tough. The rent here, now we did have the option. We were able to stay with our son and daughter-in-law. That's one of the reasons we decided to come, because at first we're like, oh, I don't know. I couldn't find, while we were here on vacation, we looked and looked and looked at different places, and none of them really look like the ones that look like we would want to live at were not in our price range. And, we didn't know the area or anything. So they said, well, we have plenty of room. Why don't you come stay with us while you try to find a place? So we did. And we were thankful that they allowed us to. But you find out that your kids don't live the same as they did when they were living in your home. It's hard. Families don't live the same as they did like when they were your kids growing up in your home. I guess maybe because you were the one making the rules and, hey, this is my home. This is how you're going to do things. And when the roles are reversed, they're not always the same. And, they have different lifestyle than what we do and whatnot. So, we ended up finally finding an apartment that we went into. And we weren't really thrilled. The apartment itself, which actually is in the same complex, wasn't a terrible apartment for the apartment. But the management that was here was horrible and stuff. So like a year later, they had because of their work schedules, had needed somebody to watch the kids overnight. So they asked us to, come when our lease was up, if we wanted to come back and stay there, we could. So we took them up on that offer, and we did. And again, very grateful that they opened up their home to us and let us live there. But they live different than what we live. And, it's just, they raised their kids different than we did. And I'm sure it was the same thing if my parents or Dave's parents would have lived with us. we live different than my parents or his parents, and I'm sure we raised our kids different than either did. Well, my mom always told me how, because we'd give the kids chores, and my mother always thought we were like, that was child abuse to make your kids do any kind of chores around there. That was just terrible. And so, she liked to let me know that quite often. But anyway, so it was just one of those things. So then we decided, okay, it's time for us to find our own place again. And it's not bad. It's just we regret leaving what we had to now have what we have. Now, granted, the apartment we went into, this is one thing that's strange about Texas. I think it's Texas. Let me know in the comments. If you live where you live in an apartment someplace, were you able to see what you were moving into before moving in? We lived in a rural community in Michigan, so we saw what we were moving. Well, the last house we lived in, we knew because we'd been in the house a million times. Our kids all lived there. But we got to see what we were moving into before you signed the lease and moved in. Here in Texas, you have to let them know ahead of time, like sometimes 4 to 6 months before you want to move in, you pick out your place to move into. And it reminds me of when you go to a hotel, hey, do you have a room with a king-size bed? They hand you the key, you sign the stuff, they hand you the key, and you go off to the room, a room with a king-size bed. Well, it's kind of the same thing here with apartments. You tell them what you want, and you can walk the property and, see which buildings you like and which ones you don't, or, if you want to be closer to the dog park, or if you want to be closer to this, or farther from this, or closer to the pool, you kind of get an idea which building you want. But you don't actually get to go in the apartment to see. And so we lived with our son, and we went into an apartment, and same complex. We kind of thought it would be the same. Thought the kitchen cabinets would be different because we knew our first apartment was upgraded and it had new things in it because there was actually a fire in that building back in 2019. So it had been all remodeled then. And so the apartment that we went into was we were kind of shell-shocked when we walked in because we weren't allowed to see it beforehand. So when we got the keys to move in and we walked in, and I'm like, oh, okay. It was nothing layout, yes, layout was the same as what we expected. But the apartment itself, it was horrible. It was not anything like we expected. The sink in the bathroom literally was like for shorter people. It came up to the top of my leg, not even hip. It wasn't hip. It was I guess maybe that's your hip. Just where your leg joined your body, that's as tall as it was. The sinks in the bathroom. It was just very, very short. The toilets were less than knee high. So it was really, everything was really low in there. The microwave, the first part we were in was normal size built-in microwave. This one was low, and there was only so much space between the stove which was gas stove, between the gas stove and the microwave. They were really strange, and it was painted this gray, brownish tan. I don't even know what color it was, and it was like stucco, and they just kept painting over it. It was really globby. Nothing would stick. You have to use a nail because nothing was sticking. Because I always use those 3M sticky things so it doesn't damage the wall at all. Not there. Nothing would stick to those walls. And so, we were there. And so, in the payment, had gone up. They just go up all the time because it's a corporate community. And so, which all the apartments are. But So anyway, we lived there, and then this apartment opened up, and it's in the same community, but it's in the building that we originally were in. So we knew this apartment and we knew it was updated already. So when the opportunity came up to snag this one, we did. So, but we are paying for rent what I never would have paid for a mortgage. I was like, I knew people paid high amounts for housing, but it's like way higher than we had ever thought. Living here, when we lived in Michigan, we were always told Michigan car insurance was the highest in the country. Well, we pay more for it here in Texas. And now our cars, because of a hailstorm last year, our cars have all kinds of damage. There's dents, well, they call them dimples, all over both of our cars. Our cars run perfectly fine. Mechanically, there's nothing wrong with them. We still owe on both of them, so we will be driving them. And, till the wheels fall off or something majorly mechanical goes wrong with them. But for one thing, you can't afford to get rid of them, so we drive them. But, we never dealt with hail where we used to live, and not that amount. And, so you just get a lot of regret. We still see our son and daughter-in-law and grandkids on occasion, but they both work lots of hours. They have the 2 kids, they're busy, so you don't just stop out there because you never know when they're going to be home. One works days, one works nights, sleep patterns and whatnot. So we just kind of rely on them mainly to come here. And so we see them. But, I'm not sure. They have their own lives now. I'm not sure if we were to not have moved to Texas. We talked all the time, FaceTime on the phone. I'm not sure they really needed us here. I think it was more we needed to see them and be available to them. But now that their kids are starting to grow and everything, I'm not sure that we're really needed here anymore. Not that I'm saying we're going to leave Texas anytime soon, but, I don't know. That's kind of to be determined yet. As we get older, renting is probably the best option for us. We're getting too old to take care of things. And, we look back and think, well, yeah, if we would have stayed on the acre of land, I'm not sure my husband's healthy would have been able to still snow blow and still mow the grass and all that stuff. I'm not sure he could have kept up with the yard that we had there. And, so I don't really regret moving from there, although I regret leaving my strawberry patch. I had a beautiful strawberry patch, and we had, he had his plants growing there. And then we moved to the other house uptown, and that was the house we always had wanted to live in, and we finally got there. We didn't live there long before we moved here. So, I kind of regret moving from there, but yet I don't really regret moving from that town. There was not, opportunity-wise, there was not a lot of opportunity. I do gig work here. I would have needed to still do something eventually up there. And that kind of stuff, doing the gig work really, I don't think probably pays much there, if they even still have it. DoorDash, that kind of stuff, I'm sure they still have. But, here at least I'm on paved roads every day. We're there, I would have probably been on a lot of dirt roads. And with the snow and everything, I probably wouldn't have been able, for part of the year, been able to do the job I do now. So, regret, yes and no. Moving here each year, and I think partially because of my thyroid, I'm guessing, I don't know, the heat gets worse as far as my body handling the heat. And my husband, who always, we lived in Florida, he liked the heat there. The heat here, he can't stand. It's stifling. And, the first year we lived here, it was extremely hot, but it was a dry heat that year. It was like 30% humidity most days. Sunny and dry, and, it was too dry, but it was dry. Now we're like 80% humidity a lot of days. You know, it might only be 90 degrees, but when you add in 80% humidity, you might as well say it's 115. It just makes the air heavy to breathe. And that's why I don't know if it's in part of my thyroid. But you sit back and you look at things, like I said, you can't go back in time, but you think, we had a really nice home in Florida that we sold to move to Michigan thinking, oh, we just need to go back home. And, we'd been fixing that place up and we had it really nice. And looking at the value of homes there, it would have been worth quite a bit of money. But then again, I remember we lived there. It was a mobile home, an older mobile home, but it had been very well taken care of. And, it was a double wide. It was on property. We had a pool. We had decks. The people before us that owned it had taken very well care of it. Then we got it. While we were living there, we had went through and replaced, remodeled and built buildings. And we had it really nice there. And so part of you kind of regrets, oh, we should have never sold that. We should have just stayed there. And, but then again, I think couldn't get insurance. It was harder to get insurance when we still owned it, because of hurricanes increasing. And I'm thinking people that own it now probably don't even have homeowners insurance, just because of the fact it was getting hard back then. The home is still there. It's that much older. We sold it, I think it was 2007. So it's been almost 20 years. Those people have had it. They probably, well, no, because there was other people that bought it in the meantime. And then they sold it. And then these people have had it for quite a few years. But I'm wondering, do they even have insurance? So then I think, okay, if we had still been living there, would we be in that boat where, yeah, we have a nice place, but you can't insure it? So, that's not good either. So, I do have regrets about things, but then, you just got to look forward to the future. Hope you have a future. We're never promised tomorrow, so who knows? I do regret leaving Michigan because, we had our granddaughter up there every other weekend, and she was like our world up there. And, we miss her terribly still. And it's been 3 years. Actually, I think today we've been here 3 years now. So, and we haven't been able to afford, since we've gotten here, we haven't been able to afford to go back up there to visit her. So, it's just been, things are expensive here, which I know they are across the United States. Everything is expensive, and I don't know, is it's ever going to get not expensive? But I keep thinking, okay, we're going to get things paid off, and then we're going to be able to do more things. But, I don't know. I guess we'll see how it all pans out. And will we stay in Texas? I don't know. Our kids have lives and they kind of do their own thing. I don't know if we'll go to where, if we'll live local. Although, you get older, you think, well, do I actually want to live where I don't have family at? As you're aging, do you want to be where you don't live near somebody? But but then again, you don't want to be a burden to your family either. So, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for us. And I'm sure if you're in the same boat, you're the same way. None of us really knows what the future holds. Our kids that live here in Texas could get jobs elsewhere next year or, in 6 months and decide they have to relocate for that, And I'm sure they're not going to not take a promotion or a different job just because we're here. And I wouldn't expect them to. I wouldn't want them to put their life on hold for us. So, I don't want them to have that regret of, yeah, we stayed because, mom and dad were there. And I wouldn't want that. So, it's just one of those things. I guess what I'm trying to say is everybody's going to have regret. At some point in life, you're going to regret certain things. You're going to regret certain purchases. You're going to regret, you know, we like our vehicles. We bought them both during the COVID years, though, and that was stupid. The one vehicle we had a vehicle, and we kept having issues with it. And back when COVID was a thing, there wasn't like rental cars readily available, and we were very rural where we lived, so there wasn't like an enterprise or anything even in that town. You had to hope you bought from a dealership that had rental vehicles. And back then it was hard to get a rental vehicle. So one time the car broke down, and I said, that's it. We're getting a second vehicle. We got to have a second vehicle. That's when we bought my little car. And it's been a good little car, really. My husband hates it. He's never really liked it. That's why it became my car after we got it. You know, I was perfectly fine with the old car that we had, but I thought, well, we need a second car. And so I get in here, my eyes water, and I think it's the sun coming in the window here that I sit in front of. But anyway, so we got the second car, and Dave didn't really like it, so I drove that car most of the time, and he drove the old car. And then one day he decided this one's got too much trouble happening with it, and he traded it in and got the car that he drives now. So we have two good cars. I really can't complain, but they were both purchased during the COVID years, so you know, people paid way too much money. If you bought a vehicle in that, 2020 to 20, I'm going to say probably 23, 24, you paid way too much for the vehicle you got. And so, we're just trying to get them both paid off. They're close, but they're not there yet. So we're trying to get them paid off. But you come where, everything is so much more money. And it, like I said, it probably is everywhere. Rent's high. Groceries are high, gas is high, insurance is high, oil changes are high. Everything costs more money, which is why if you didn't watch yesterday's video, go watch that. It's a long one, but I talk about the gig work that I do. And that's why I do it. That's why I do it 7 days a week, because you got to make ends meet somehow. So, but yeah, that's, like I say, I'm not sure if we didn't live here that we would be missed that much. I mean, I'm sure to some extent, and we would, miss not being around our kids, but like I say, they have their own lives, and I think as you get older, you reflect on that, and maybe there's some that are, you think, oh, I could never move away from my kids, but are you holding your kids back from ever moving away from you? Or are you ready if your kids decide they're going to move away from you to take a job, or maybe their spouses always wanted to live in a different state, or maybe their spouse is from a different state, and that one would like to, go home by their family. You just never know nowadays. People move. When I was growing up, my siblings and I, we lived same town my parents lived in, and you might move a town over, but you were within like a 45-minute drive from home always. And that's how, all my cousins were. That's just how family was back then. You all stayed in this little section. And until somebody in the family marries somebody from a different area, or takes a job in a different area, then things start getting spread out. I remember when our boys were little thinking, what am I going to do if one day one kid lives on one side of the country and the other lives on the other side of the country? And in my mind, I was like, oh, by then we'll both be retired. Everything will be paid for. We'll just go visit this kid for, a couple months of the year, and then we'll go visit that kid for a couple months of the year. And then life happens, and you realize that ain't happening. You can't afford to go visit this kid on this side of the country and this kid on that side of the country, because it costs a lot of money. And, you got to work to support yourself. So when you're working, you don't have time. Even if you did have the money, you don't have the time to travel. So, but anyway, that's just my thought for the day. I'm going to cut this a little shorter. We're at 35 minutes, I see right now, and I do not want to bore you any more than I probably already have. But if you've ever had some regrets that you care to share, drop it in the comments. I enjoy seeing the comments and seeing what your thoughts are on this. I think, just like I said, as we get older, you kind of reflect more on things you regret. Would you have done them different? Would you have done them the same? And, not like we can go back and change things up. So if we have the regrets, you have the regrets. You're stuck with them. The only thing you can do is change things going forward. So, but I hope everybody's having a great day today. Hope it's not quite as hot as it is here. I'm getting ready to, I'm done with this video. I'm going to hop on the old DoorDash app if I can get on there and get working. So I gotta go. Gotta go to the watering hole today. We have recently found they had these machines everywhere. Maybe this is not a thing either. Maybe this is everywhere. But we have noticed recently these watering stations throughout town. Like they're at the grocery stores, outside the grocery stores. And they're just like along some of the highways or the streets, And so we stopped one day to see them. Like, you see people filling like their water jugs there. And so we stopped and like to buy a gallon of water, because the water here you don't drink. The water here, now if you don't mind pool water, that's probably okay to drink. I grew up on well. I grew up with well water. I'm okay with well water. But this water here is city water, and it tastes like you're chlorinated to death. It smells like you're drinking bleach out of the faucet. So I don't use the water here other than, for washing and that kind of stuff. And it's very hard water. So we buy bottled water. And bottled water here is running, I don't know, $1.30 something, $1.40 something a gallon, which I can't believe we even pay for water. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you'd have been like, you pay for water? Why on earth would you do that? Well, here we are. We found a filling station that instead of, you take your jugs with you, and it's like 35 cents a gallon versus at Walmart it's $1.47, I believe. The H-E-B and Aldi it's like $1.37 or something. And so we go to the filling station. I wash the jugs and then let them dry. Take them with us about once a week, and we go, and it's $2 or $3 versus $8 or $9. To fill the jugs versus buying new. Plastic must be very costly. So yeah, and today is the day. You notice we make coffee. It's like, okay, today's water day, and the way they're set up. If you've ever been to Texas, the sun, when it's hitting stuff, you can't see. So to see what the little screen is to tap and pay, you got to be able to see. You don't go certain times of the day because the sun is beating on that screen, and you can't. We learned that the first day. You can't see what the screen says. And so we're going to go do that, I think, before I start dashing, just so that we can get that task done and out of the way. So we call it the watering hole. It's a water refill station, but it's time to head off to the old watering hole and get that task done for the day. So, but again, have a great day, everyone, and I will talk to you again real soon here in the next video. Bye.